zoology, basketball, and then you end up in the CIA. Did you take the wrong turn in one of the recruiting booths, or what happened? Did you always have an interest in national security, or?
Well, I always think we are who we begin as, and I'm the third child of a naval officer, right? So if you're the third child of Bob and Shaw Monroe, you are taught two things your whole life. One, you're supposed to do your best, and you're supposed to do something for the cause. And so that's kind of who I was. I went to Duke to become a world-famous aquanaut. In my age group, on Sunday nights, you watch two shows, Mutual of Omaha, Wild Kingdom, and The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And I had a great teacher, and I just decided that's who I was going to be. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of schools that I wanted to go to that had a marine biology program, but Duke had a marine science consortium on the East Coast. I thought, well, that's perfect. If I don't want to be a marine biologist, I can go to Duke, and I can get that there. Unfortunately, I played basketball, and so I never had my spring times free. I went through school. I had some great professors who, taught me to be curious. The great thing about a Zoe degree is it's the mystery of life stuff. And it will become important in my career. I couldn't decide if I wanted to get my PhD in biomechanics or go to law school because I love arguing. And so, I decided to find a job, and CIA was recruiting on campus, and I went in and interviewed, and I guess they saw something in me they liked. I was hired to do analysis of Soviet biological warfare. So that makes sense, right? Critters. Unfortunately, when I show up, a bright, shiny 21-year-old with my security clearance all ready to go, they told me that the job had been downsized during the recession, and I had 30 days to find work. The only job I could find was doing analysis of technical data from the National Security Agency on Soviet naval missiles. And I said, well, I can do that. They're like, wait, you have a degree in zoology? And I said that mechanical engineering was really just applied zoology. Okay, you laugh. Where do you find frictionless joints? In a baby's knee. Really. So they decided I was either scary or really competent, and they hired me. And then I just had a place that was kind of like, for me, peas and carrots. It was big, so if you had big ideas, you could do big things. You were expected to perform, and performance was more important than pedigree, so pretty quickly they forgot that I had this degree in zoology because I kept doing things, and I moved through doing analysis of Soviet missiles to analysis of Soviet spacecraft to building U.S. spacecrafts to building in-place sensors to going into IT and just kind of moving along. And so there are lots of lessons there for you. The biggest one is you're going to do lots of things in your life. You don't have to do it all in the first year. And the second thing is you're not stuck with the knowledge you have.
So one of the things I learned a month ago with you on stage, actually, was that getting into CIA is even harder than getting into Harvard or Stanford.
It is.
Right? 1 out of 1,500 people.
1 out of 1,500 people.
Which is just an amazing statistic of the people who apply. And that kind of, I think, set maybe the milieu that you were in, right? You were swimming in the sea of other very smart and aggressive and creative people, just like Stanford students.
Right.
But you mentioned something else that I thought was interesting, and you normally don't hear it, but it's the key to intelligence is curiosity. Tell me more about that, and because you were an analyst, it was obviously key to things you were looking at and things you were thinking about. How did that work in your business?
So I don't know whether this is a story I've made up or it's true, but actually...
It'll be true after you say it.
So what's fun about biology is an inductive science, right? Whatever you see, whatever organism there is, you presume that it's doing what it's doing perfectly. Right, that's evolution. And your job is not to judge the goodness, but rather to understand what it's doing. And that's actually fundamentally what intelligence is about, and that's what differs from law enforcement, which tends to be more deductive. This is inductive. So, number one, I was really comfortable with this, what am I looking at, what am I seeing, sort of thing. So that suited me intellectually, and so that's a really kind of opens up some really interesting possibilities when you ask that question. The second thing is when I got into building systems, the CIA is really unique in that it doesn't do 800,000 of anything. Ever see the movie A Few Good Men? right? When Colonel Jessup is on the stand and say, you want us on that wall, you need us on the wall. The role of the CIA is to do what no one else can, but you only have to do it once. So you can be crazy big and crazy creative because it must be solved and it can't be solved in any way. So that just, again, suited me. I'm an outcome gal. What do we need to do? I'm not wedded to any particular path to that. Maybe because I acquired expertise, but you would never have considered me an expert. And because of that, I was not wedded to any solution that was based on how I thought it should be. Said differently, I was never righteous, I just wanted to be right. And so that opened up some...
That's a great line.
Sue, why don't, can you share a little bit more about how your role evolved at the CIA over the years?
Yeah, so you're gonna think, I described it as a straight line. It was not. My first job was too easy. And so I forgot that there was a discipline to it. And one day I was alone and I made a call based on technical data that made a lot of sense to me. And I wrote an article that somehow got into the president's book. It turned out that I was right technically, but I didn't understand that what I had just done is the Soviets had tested a missile that violated the START treaty.
Oops.
Whoops. Right, so think about that, right? I was right technically, and this is kind of a recurring theme with Sue in terms of what I didn't understand. So that wasn't my best day, but I recovered. I got another job in a really cool doing space policy at the time that space policy was so much fun. This is the ABM Treaty and Star Wars, and I was doing the intelligence side of that. I was really junior for the job I had, and I was whizzing along, and I had a boss that decided that I would, he didn't like women, particularly women who didn't have degrees in engineering, and I was out on the West Coast doing a part of my job, and when I came back, I didn't have that job anymore. I was sent back to the most grunty job in all of the Office of Scientific and Weapons Research, which turned out to be the transportation to the first part of my career, because instead of being someone who could talk good, I had to learn a craft. And I will tell you, you all are all so smart, and people will hire you to do things. Make sure you actually learn how to accomplish something. Don't be sucked into a job where someone wants you to be on their staff or something like that, because learning how to do anything. So I went backwards in an unceremonious way. I did a technical analysis of Soviet communication satellites, which are really boring and dumb.
Why didn't you quit?
Because I had a great boss who said, Sue, you might be right, you may not have a future here, but you don't ever want to let someone think that your performance is dependent on them. So why don't you go ahead and be good at your job, and then if you want to go, then you can go to something. And it actually worked out that way. I'm 24 years old when I'm deciding that they don't like me. I mean, how, in a way that only a 24-year-old can think, like, they don't recognize my brilliance. But I...
Story of my life.
but I did, and I'll get there to... So I moved on, and because of the things I'd done in doing analysis of Soviet spacecraft, it turned out that the U.S. was building a first-of-a-kind spacecraft, super secret, only one ever built, a mission I can't tell you about, but it needed that expertise. And so they hired this 25-year-old former zoologist to do subsystem design for a spacecraft. I know, right? How cool is that? And so I did that, and then I had a boss that came to me and...
Wait a minute, did you just tell us the CIA makes spacecraft? Is that
They
what
do.
you just told us?
They do. They did then.
Right.
Now a lot of services used to do it. Now the National Reconnaissance has consolidated all those things. Oh my gosh, you guys. Let me digress for just 1 second. The role of national security in the advance of technology in the United States cannot be underestimated. You want to know why we're good at mammograms? Is because of the imagery science that was developed as part of our first photo reconnaissance systems. There is so much societal gain that has come from this pull from national security. This is a really fraught time of strategic uncertainty where we're going to be developing a lot of new. I will tell you that it will be a great time to be in national security, to be part of the pull, not just part of the development of the capabilities that will come. So it's all part of the same, but this is a really interesting time. So we do build them. They let youngsters do it, and that's because they're so confident in the craft surrounding them. And then I had a boss come to me, and this is a sign of, you want to hear my best failure story? Yeah, this is going to make you feel better about anything you do in the future, right? I'm giving you a future past based on my story. So I'm 26 years old. My boss comes to me and said, Sue, we need you to develop in 6 months a brand new concept for how we're going to get data back from a clandestinely in place source for the first time ever in real time. So we need to get data from a really scary place that you don't want US people to be known to be there. And your solution is going to make us have to go back fewer times. We have $3 billion set aside for it. We'd like your answer to come back in under $3 billion. 6 months, here's $50 million, wow. Go figure it out. Like, think about that, right? That's just like this undifferentiated task. And I will tell you, you can't go to your boss and say, how do you want me to figure it out? Well, you can ask once. They'll kind of hem and haw. Do not ask a second time, because then they'll constrain you, right? And they don't know. So I went off, and I got the Air Force involved, because if you're going to do a low-power signal from Earth, you got to have a lot of gain in space. And so I'm talking to these guys like, what kind of reflector can you put on a spacecraft that you haven't launched yet? And they're like, oh, if you'll give me $1 million for a wiring harness. So I'm making these deals. Did I say I'm 26 years old with a degree in zoology? And then I did the 3-bear approach to building the ground system. I went to a big company, a medium-sized company, and a small company, and I said, work with me, and darned if they didn't. And after 4 months, we had a solution that was technically shocking, only $650 million, ready to go.
And did it go?
No. So here's what happened on one day. The small company was the one that had the best design. Problem is, a small company had only had a contract for $1 million and had never been in debt. And so because I'm a very straight shooting 26-year-old with my contractor, I said, hey, love your design, but you're too small. We'll partner you with one of the big guys in order to do it. I thought that was only fair to tell him that. One day I come into work, the head of the National Reconnaissance Office, to me, that's tantamount to God. Like, I had a boss who was godlike, but this guy was even more than that. I pick up the phone and he says, Susie, and this is a bad day, because do I look like a Susie? He says, Susie, I don't know who the hell you think you are, that stupid agency you work for, but I want you to know that it's going to be my life's work to make sure your project never sees the light of day. Those Air Force people that have worked with you, they've already been removed from their position, and they will never get promoted to the rank. Whoa. I don't care about your solution. You didn't talk to any of the stakeholders. You haven't talked to Congress. You don't know the other things we had planned. Over. I will not allow this to ever succeed. That was not the worst call I had. The next call was the worst call. I thought it was going to be great. It was the president of the small company. He said, Sue, great news. I sold my company last night to Westinghouse. We can now take on the contract that you're going to give us.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
A man sold his life's work because a 26-year-old was not smart enough to either understand that it's not the brilliance of the technical solution, it's all the things around it that make it work. And I just wasn't experienced to understand the limitations of the relationship between the government and the contractor for good reason. So we'll do audience participation. What do you do next if you're me? Crying? Absolutely not. That's later at night in my own home. What do I do next? This is really important. This is going to be the best piece of advice I'll give you. Yes, ma'am?
Talk to your contracting officer.
Nope. Close. You're on your way, but no. Someone else leap into the fray, and then I'll give you the answer. What do you do next? Yes?
Can you explain what just happened to this?
Yes, you must go to your boss and present yourself for flogging. Like, there's nothing good that happens if you don't. So I go to my boss. Sorry, this is so long-winded, Ernestine.
Right.
So I go to my boss and I say, here's what happens. And you know what the man said? And it changed my life. He said, oh, I've seen worse. It didn't mean it wasn't bad. It meant that he was good enough his job, that he could allow me to be expansive and still recover from anything that had happened. And he kicked me back into the fray, so I still had to learn all the lessons, and trust me, I feel it to this day. But I decided I wanted to be the guy that could always say I've seen worse.
So there are some important lessons embedded in that about stakeholders and understanding more than just your core piece of the shiny object. Can you expand on that for a second? Because I think that's pretty core to building a successful organization, is understanding all the stakeholders.
Yeah. So let's bounce one higher than stakeholders. Understand all the risks associated with the program, and each stakeholder holds a different kind of risk, right? So I was really on the engineering side, and risk to an engineer is that your thing won't work, right? And I understood that. I delivered something that worked. But risk organizationally is that budget for this will supplant, that someone will be interested in this more than the thing that the organization had planned to do. And I have inadvertently created competition within the organization for a competing mission priority, right? That's another kind of risk. Congressional risk. They don't like things that happen in the middle of a budget cycle that they weren't involved in. And Congress sometimes, for retribution, will not smack the one that did the deed, but other priorities that want to come along. So, I mean, there are just a number of these that, in that case, those were the ones. The way I would tell to you is you have to think about the ecosystem involved in any project, or your mantra should be, oh, you wanted it to work. And we do this a lot. We'll talk about the whole defense ecosystem now. Throwing a capability over the transom to somebody else to say, you fit it into your system, how likely is that going to be successful? Not. Can you be proud of the thing you threw over the transom? Absolutely. Does that count? Absolutely not. There was no pride in, but it was really good. They just didn't use it.
It's a great line.
Right? So this idea of thinking end to end about how it can work, not just what it can do, is a really important thing. You want to get your boss to buy your idea? Man, take it a lot further an idea. You know where great ideas end up on your boss's desk? Right there on the set of things that I'm too busy to take care of. You want them to do something with them? Show them how they can have it, not just what it is. And so that's what I didn't understand. It's like a really kind of immutable principle that if you learn it early, you're going to be shocked at how many of the things that you proffer will actually be accepted.
That's great advice. So at what point were you manager, Sue? That is, what point were you leader, Sue, versus individual?
Remember when I got bounced out of the office because I wasn't an engineer and I thought my career was over, so I went over to build spacecraft? Neatly enough, when I went away and did that, they called me up and say, hey, Sue, we have this branch that needs managing back in the same division. And so I came back as a first-line supervisor at 27.
Wow.
I was a GS-13.
Wow.
Of 15, leader of 15 GS-15.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a great day. And I sucked at it because, because I didn't yet understand what leadership really is. It's how to be accountable without having to do all the work yourself, right? Because it wasn't the standard of how I would do each task. It was the direction I was going to set and the standard for the quality of work, not the actual work itself. And I sent a thank you note to everyone in my branch that they were still there after 6 months. So I became manager, Sue, and it turned out I was okay at that. It was I got to do so many great projects because it was Space Missions Division, right in the heyday of the space race. Sally Ride and I were working on things together. I briefed President Reagan. And then my boss comes to me and says, hey, Sue, I'd like you to go from this job to be the deputy director of the Information Systems Division. Yeah. And I said, oh no, that sounds awful. Oh, come on, Steve. In 1989, IT in the government was wiring closets. Right? It was just not sexy. And I thought I was one of the cool kids, and I thought that that was where they put women as support officers. So I said no. And he said, no, I really want you to. And I said no. And he came back and he said, I really want you to. And then I said yes. So, you know, if there's someone you respect, asks you to do something, do it. And if the first failure of the guy who wanted to kick me out because I was a woman gave me the first few years of my career, that move to IT gave me the middle part of my career, and that became how I got into analytic tools and what gave me the readiness to receive the task on how we get to Silicon Valley that became Incutel, gave me the legs into cyber, all because I was offered a job that I didn't want to do. So I become manager, Sue, kind of throughout that, and that's who I am the rest of my days.
So go ahead.
No, definitely want to revisit the Incutel story, but how did you then go from CIA, NGA, DNI, you know, that whole career arc?
Okay, so,
We should make this the 3-hour talk.
I'm really sorry. I'm
I don't know.
trying to,
No, I
I'm
don't know
trying
about
to be
you guys.
short.
No,
I'm trying to be
I want to
tight
stay
and
all
focused.
night.
And if you walk out, I will try and pretend that it wasn't in a huff, and then I won't have my feelings hurt. I'm trundling along. We'll get back to Incutel. I did Incutel. Oh, I also got married in college to the cutest guy ever, who we just celebrated our 43rd wedding anniversary. We have 2 kids. I cheated time all my years of how do you do really hard jobs and have a family that you're really committed to, and so I have a good engine, and so I work lots of extra hours. After I delivered Incutel, the jig was up, and I realized that I couldn't, for me, both be great at work and be great at home. Many people can figure out how to do both. I could not, so I gave 2 weeks notice and I resigned. So from 1999 till 2007, I'm Jay and Casey's mom.
What?
I did a little bit of contracting after 9/11 because everyone came back after 9/11. But that's what I do. And then I successfully deployed my children into college, and I looked around and I said,
Did you realize you were all deployed? Is that?
oh, come on, your parents say it. It's all right. You can
Was it
bet.
easy to jump back in?
Yeah. Yeah. So I saw the head of personnel at the CIA in Wegmans, and I said, hey, you guys hiring? And so I came back, and I got into, I had the greatest second act ever for a career. So if the first was analysis, then engineering, then information systems, the second half was I became the director of special activities at the CIA. Do you know what that is? Is that like the best title ever? Yeah, just imagine what it is, and it's like way better than that. Like it's super good. It's building covert action tools for operations. It was just the best job ever. But that's another way of learning about risk. Then I became the deputy director of information operations. I'll tell you another way that my jobs came to me. My boss called and said, hey, Sue, so I'm an office director. She said, hey, Sue, I'm thinking I want you to become the deputy director of information operations. So I'm the chief. I'd like you to become the deputy. And I said, she said, what do you think? And I said, I don't know, do you want me to do it? And she said, I think I do. And I said, okay. And she said, are we going to talk about it? And I said, no. Back to this, the people you respect, you do something, do it. So that got me into cyber and information operations in what I will say is the pre-crazy heyday of when it was nation states acting in the Wild West beneath anyone's notice.
So was this before DDI, or did this become the?
So before, then I become the director of support because I'm the person that you hire at the CIA if you want something done. Dave Petraeus made me his director of support, so that's security, finance, logistics, medical, IT, all those things. Great job, best job ever. The people who make the quiet that lets mission happen are really remarkable. Don't judge people who do support. People who do support are amazing. And then John Brennan comes to me and said, could you figure out cyber for the agency? I said, what do you mean? He said, I don't know. I said, never mind, I'll figure it out. And 90 days later, I delivered a pretty transformative report about how the CIA could be successful in the digital era, which included the formation of the Directorate of Digital Innovation. But because he really liked it, but the agency didn't particularly, because I moved a lot of cheese, I had to be voted off the island. Because if you want to have the transformation happen, sometimes you have to take away the personality for the person. So I was upset. It was really awful. I loved the CIA. And I was offered the job of deputy director at NGA. If you're a CIA officer, you're like, why would I want to do that? Another thing I didn't want to do, or that was the product of a failure, whichever the way you want to see it, best thing that happened ever. NGA taught me about combat support. It taught me about succeeding in the open. It taught me about modern transformation. What the director was so good at was to imagine his mission in the future, not modernizing his mission. You know what I mean by that? You can't get to the future from the present. So you got to say, what is this going to be here? And then say, what do I have to do to make it there? So, and then I became the director of national intelligence. So all those things, like none of the jobs I had made sense until the last one, right? Like, how did she get all those jobs that were each one so different? But this last one, being the deputy director of national intelligence, only a woman who had done all those things.
And Sue, can you describe that just for those in the room? Like,
Sure.
what is that last role?
So the principal deputy director of national intelligence is a political appointee. It's its own decision to become a political appointee because forever then you're aligned with whatever administration is in office. I wasn't worried about that because everyone knew I was the intelligence officer and so presumed to be independent, so I thought it was just a titular thing. The principal deputy is, as Paul said, is the senior intelligence officer. So while Dan Coates, the director, he was a senator, he was mostly responsible for interacting at the policy level. I was the one that ran the intelligence community. The intelligence community is what?
So you did the work.
Yeah, 18 agencies, over 100,000 humans, $80 billion. During when we realized that we had really missed the digital revolution because of the war on terror, and we had to move to.
So these 18 agencies, right? 17 inside the DoD and the CIA, right. Is that?
There are only 2 independent agencies in the intelligence community. One is the CIA. Name the other one. ODNI. Yeah, ODNI. Right. The rest belong to a secretary, which is an interesting leadership position. So every other leadership position I had was straight line management. I owned the resources. The principal deputy, you're really leading through influence and budget control a loose confederation of agencies, each of whom is prosecuting their own program. You're just trying to gently align them.
Well, and so, you know, now you sit on some really interesting both commercial boards, but also advisory boards for the U.S. government, trying to think about innovation. You know, what have you learned, and what lessons do you think we still need to learn about innovation in intelligence and defense?
So let's talk in 2 voices. Right. One, I'll get to you, because there's some things you need to learn about innovation, because this is a time that we just can't draft off the work of our predecessors, so you're going to have to lead change and lead the development of things. So I'll get to you. Organizationally, we get stuck thinking that how we do things are what we do, right?
What does that mean?
It means that the CIA was formed in 1947. Most of the approaches to intelligence that it has were based on the world of 1947.
Got it.
They were built, our systems were built when we were hunters of information, and we had to build special things to go find what were mostly secrets. And so there were just, it was all political military. There were very few people that we trusted. We had a singular adversary by and large. And so that was kind of who we were. When the wall came down, we pretty much prosecuted the world the same way. We just pretended that we had the same craft applied to everybody else, and we're dragging the Cold War with us, because I can't let that stuff go. Then the war on terror happens. That's another jump shift, where now it's not governments hold the information, it's individuals, and it isn't going into an office safe, it's trying to figure out their communication. So you have the rise of cyber. You have to be partners with people you don't trust, and now there are a whole bunch of stakeholders at state and local level, because they're the ones that are going to feel the pain. And then now you go into great power competition. But almost all the things we are artifacts of how we began, and layering things on top of those original processes that we think are sacrosanct, but in fact were just the responses to certain needs that were how we should do it at that time.
Give us one.
Secrecy.
Okay.
So if you think CIA, you think the job of the CIA is secrecy. Now, the job of the CIA is national security. If I tell you that in 2023, the national security decision makers are disproportionately in the private sector and in the citizenry, what's the CIA's responsibility for national security to those national security decision makers? How should it think about open source? How should it think about its craft? Classification. We are secretly collecting open information all the time.
Think about that.
Right? What do you do with that? And we're not dilettantes, right? That's the systems we have. So what I would say is, you have to let go of how you do it from what you're doing. And the easiest way I know how to get that clarity is to go back to the founder's vision. So I will say the founder's vision of the CIA and intelligence was to basically know the truth, see beyond the horizon, and allow leaders to act before events dictate. Well, there is nothing passé about that mission. But how you do it today is super different. The advent of commercial technology, the nature of partners, the rise of pesky sovereignty in a digitally connected world, so many things are different about that. So you hold on to what you're trying to do, and then you think about how you do it differently. And the other thing I'll tell you organizationally is, everyone hates change. I encourage you to hate irrelevance more.
Ooh, good point.
Right, because that's what you're doing. You're not changing, you're trying to be relevant every day. So that's the organizational one. The individual one, this is easy. If you're given a task to change, or it comes upon you, the first thing you have to do is think. You have to establish a vision. For God's sake, don't take somebody else's. And the reason why you can't take somebody else's is because along the path of development, you're going to have to make some choices. If you've taken someone else's vision, you won't know how to make those choices, because you're just carrying them with you. So the first thing you do is think. The second thing is, you got to jump to the future, see what is necessary, and then build to it. My best example is JFK and the space program. We're gonna go to the moon, return man safely to Earth by the end of the decade. We had no idea how to do it. He envisioned it. We built the capability, and as a result, we got Tang and Velcro. There are people today who are trying to get to the future by building Tang and Velcro.
Yeah. So Sue, these are great lessons. In-Q-Tel, how did that come about? How did you apply some of these lessons to creating that?
Great. Undifferentiated task. George Tenet needed something cool in his strategic plan. You always think these things start from really high-minded reasons. Sometimes you do things because it's a task. He turned to the director of science and technology and said, put something cool in my strategic plan. She was a woman from Sandia. She actually had cool ideas, and she was an IT person. She said, I have a vision of an agile intelligence enterprise. Go create that. I wanted to say, what do you mean? Because I didn't get it. She said, maybe an FFRDC, a Federally Funded Research and Development Center. I said, stop talking, I'll go figure it out. So I thought. And what I thought is the nature of public-private partnership needed to change, that we had to do things differently to be attractive to what was going on in Silicon Valley. And so through a long drawn-out process that I won't go through, came up with the things that I had to give up to get to the future. You can't carry everything with you. You're going to have to give some things up. So here are the things that we gave up. We gave up classified contracts because we gave up a statement of work that told a company what it should do, and we gave up owning intellectual property. Those were all really important things to attract. But what's the structure you came up with? Here's what I envisioned. Had to get it outside the government. We just weren't trusted enough in 1998 by the Valley, and we too hidebound to change how we did things internally. So I asked a group of private citizens to be the founding board, to essentially decide to come together to form a company for our purpose. Now, because this was such a radical idea, I needed a group of people that I trusted, and so these were the icons of the defense industrial. We asked Norm Augustine, look him up, Augustine Law is one of the best books ever, was the president of the board, and we put a bunch of great people on it. And then if the board had to be appealing to the defense industrial and the national security community, the CEO had to be appealing.
Got it.
I know, it all makes sense now,
Yeah,
right?
It makes sense.
The CEO had to be appealing to Silicon Valley. And so we knew that it needed to be, but I got rid of the task in 7 months. So by the time I was tasked to the day In-Q-Tel was incorporated was 7 months. It's like super fast, right? The first board chose the first CEO, and the first CEO is a guy named Gilman Louie, who now is kind of iconic. He's an investor, and he's the cool kid on the various Senate committees. Back then, he was fresh off Hasbro as having developed Flight Simulator.
And so head of Spectrum Holobyte, a video game company.
That's exactly right. So 7 months, crazy idea. I had learned a lot about the support I needed. You have to understand your task, so I knew how it needed to be different. The one thing I will tell you when you innovate, you do have to account for the reason things were done as they were in the past. You want to create change in a big organization, not just start a new company to do your thing. You can't just be willy-nilly. So the question was, how am I going to account for security differently from how are you going to? So that's a really great lesson, is you can't just wish it away. You have to account for it differently. And the way I accounted for it was the capability was one that we needed to exist. The use of the capability was what would remain classified.
Very cool. Can I ask last question, or?
How did I do? Did I hit most points?
You did, you
Yeah.
did. And of course, I started my investment career with Gilman, so it's fun to see how you describe him as
Yeah.
well.
Oh,
Gilman
he's the best. I mean, we could talk about why In-Q-Tel has been so successful. It's 25 years old this coming year. Part of it was because we gave up control. Like, if the government had held on to it, if the government had a seat on the board, George Sennett, the director, wanted a seat on the board, and I said he couldn't have it. So the success of it has been that it has been true to the setup, that it was an independent 501c3 led by CEOs who independently decided on the approach. Now, if they had drifted from the mission we have, we wouldn't have issued the next contract with them. So we had some control. But, Gilman was really aggressive. Chris Darby has been really aggressive. So part of the success of In-Q-Tel has been that the government didn't hold too tight. And so it could become what the environment needed to be. And that's super scary as an innovator to let go.
So Sue, maybe kind of wrapping some of this
Yes,
up.
sir.
Lessons from Ukraine and lessons from the intelligence failure in Israel. How do you think that's going to affect U.S. both innovation in terms of thinking about, how do we organize forces for drones and the rest, and then how do we think about intelligence failures? Either one or both.
Well, lessons from Ukraine, I think the biggest one we're going to take away is you're going to continue on this path of transparency. That you saw it used by releasing, there's been this whole trend for the past 5 years of selectively releasing more classified information publicly. when the public's trust needed to be in. So I think that's one thing out of Ukraine. The second thing out of Ukraine is just the value of commercial capability and the flexibility that it allows. And so you're going to, I think, start seeing more commercial companies engage allies and partners because they have some capability to provide intelligence capability with much less installed base than if you rely on the U.S. to do it. There are some problems with that, and that would be a whole different lecture. So I think there's some out of Ukraine. Israel, Hamas, it's so early. I hesitate to draw big conclusions, but I'll give you 4 that I have. Number 1 is I fear that we expected technology to do everything. That is, that if we had amassed all the technology, that somehow we would have the ability to use it as we needed. This use thing, this outcome, how is it going to be employed? How is it getting to use? How are decisions made? I think that needs to continue to be wrapped around all the capability that we're developing. So that's 1. 2, I think history will show that we didn't learn the lessons of 9/11 very well and we weren't sharing the information we had. I suspect we will find information that could have been shared and wasn't. I think there will be some artifact of decision-making about the risks that Allied intelligence entities wanted to take in terms of where they were deploying their forces. And the truth is, intelligence is best gained where the risk is. But I think that's happened. And I think those are probably only 3. The 4th thing I would say is, much as what happened in Iraq, we threw a big rock in a big lake, and we aren't going to know where those ripples are going to hit, and it's going to be some time before that happens. Oh, my 4th rule would be hubris. I think there was probably some hubris involved, just thinking that we were projecting that Hamas wouldn't do that at the time or didn't have the capability.
And then you just, in saying that, and I'll turn it back to Ernestine to close, is that the CIA was founded as a human intelligence agency. And I think your point back to, we layered over the last 50 years or so a series of technology bubbles around that, sometimes forgetting that some of the best intelligence is still human.
So the best intelligence is human. Some of the best decision making is how humans decide to use technology.
Right. There we go.
Right.
Yeah, and Sue, just to wrap up, what advice do you have for individuals who are looking to serve?
Best first 5 years you'll ever take. There's just, put aside the money. You're going to make plenty of money. Think about it. If you want to think about it as your gap years when you would otherwise be wandering around Europe, which, by the way, I would encourage everyone to live overseas. I think that's a super important thing to get that perspective. The reason I say best first 5 years, maybe I'm projecting based on my career, I learned about big purpose. Government has big purpose. There are lots of things that are being said about government right now, but I love the entrepreneurship in America. I love the vibrancy of this economy, and it really is a strength of America. But there is a big difference between the weight that's on an entrepreneur that started their own company and what it's like when you know the humans are at stake for what you're doing. So you're going to learn big purpose and big weight. And the second is you're going to get more responsibility earlier. When I left school, my engineering friends, they went and they were on a team that was designing a bushing. And I was writing for the president, right? And that is just the feeling weight early is like the best thing you can do. So best first 5 years, do it. Plus you'll get a security clearance that translates into tens of thousands of dollars. And then go do something else.
Well, I think this was an enormously interesting conversation with an enormously interesting person that
Steve?
I have to tell you, someday you're going to look back and go, I can't believe who we had speaking. And
We're already thinking that.
Yeah, well, and I'm hoping some of the things that Sue said not only resonate in terms of wisdom, but resonate in the first 5 years of your career. I thought of all the takeaways I'd be thinking hard about was that think of this as an extended gap year, where in fact you could be learning something early on in your career that no one else will be able to duplicate in any other commercial company in any other place, and you have the rest of your career to go figure out how to turn that into enormous amounts of cash after you leave. And of course, we're hoping you're going to stick, but at least give it a shot. So with that, thank you very much, Sue. I thought this was
Thanks,
spectacular.
Steve. And just remember, hopes and dreams on you. Everything we wish for are on your shoulders.